Hey everybody, I'm Sam Solomon and this is Signal Tower. Today I'm joined by Travis Truett, who's the founder of Ambition, which is a sales productivity platform centered around teams. Travis, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. Real appreciative.
Absolutely. So Travis, tell me, what your path was like to become an entrepreneur. What was that like? How did you get to where you are?
It's a great question. Definitely, I think calling it a path would be a stretch. Definitely, a couple forks in the road. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what it was. I'd say that probably a healthy disrespect of authority from a very young age probably led me to where I am now. In college, I was always spending more time. I was at the point basically where I was skipping most of my classes just to work and try new things, and I had like this corporate internship, and then I was also start working on these side business plans and ideas. And I kind of just realized early on that I had more fun kind of being in control of my own destiny and being able to write my own path. And from there, basically, I actually graduated college, and instead of kind of jumping right into it, I listened to some very wise mentors of mine, and that basically said, look, if there's any time in your life to travel and just to do something crazy, it's right after college. And I actually spent 2 years traveling, and I work in Europe as a climbing instructor in the summer and fall, and then I'd move out west to Utah or California and work as a ski instructor, and I'd do that in the winter and spring, and kind of just lived the bum life. And then I finally got pretty restless with it, and basically decided to join up with a couple buddies from college and kind of go in with our first idea. And being three business guys, none of us were technical. We decided, we had this idea and we didn't really know how to go forward with it except for, the mythical term that is outsourcing. So we said, hey, we'll outsource this. Surely this will work. And we ended up finding a firm, and the price was $12,000 for what we wanted done. And me kind of, spending the last 2 years as a bum, I had basically no money in the bank. So I ended up, in order to be able to fulfill my portion, I ended up surrendering my life insurance policy and selling my class ring, and basically just putting every asset on the line. Just again, not really knowing any better, just saying, okay, let's do this. And basically, what happened, as you could probably surmise, was about 10 weeks later, all of our money was completely wasted. It was an epic failure. We just had no idea what we were doing. I was basically playing the role as project manager for the first time. I was having conference calls 13 and a half hours ahead with India, and basically it just fell apart. But two special things happened, and one was that it really solidified my belief that this was for me. And even though I was broker than I'd ever been in my life, I was living on my buddy's couch. I knew then and there that as inspired as I was during that 10 weeks of actually playing project manager and build something that we had dreamed up, and knowing that hopefully one day it was going to help people, I knew that I could never go back. I could never take in my opinion, the easy road out. And I knew that entrepreneurship was for me. And the second big critical thing was I realized if I was going to stay in technology and if I was going to be a leader in technology, I had to learn to program. I had to, I'm a big believer that the best managers are those that can, they know what it's like to get in the trenches and build, and they know what it takes, and they can relate, and they can get down there and get dirty if they have to. So I basically devoted a couple years of my life to learning to program basically every second of every evening and weekend, and it started paying off, and I was able to recruit a team. And fast forward 3.5 years later, and here we are now. So that's kind of the story.
When you were learning to do that, was that was after college that you were kind of working on teaching yourself to program?
Yeah, that was after college. I had an intern that I'd worked with at a previous startup. He'd always told me that when you look at a computer for the first time, when you're let's call it 10 years old, you either decide I want to take it apart and figure out how it works, or I want to play games on it and talk to girls. And unfortunately, I was in the camp that was playing games and talking to girls, whereas I wish if I could go back in time, I'd actually learned how to program, from the get-go. So yeah, I actually went through college, basically wasted 4 years of college, helped me. And yeah, learned after the fact. I didn't really learn to program until about 2 years outside of college.
So and I'm curious, what do you program in?
Primarily Python. So, I mean, basically, I'm kind of like a one language type of guy. Python, Django, and then, the web stuff, so HTML, CSS, a little bit of JavaScript. I've always, I want to, dive in and do everything from, C to Lisp and everything in between. But unfortunately now I spend less of my time programming, more of my time, kind of running the business, which is fun, but I genuinely enjoyed the engineering aspect of it. So hopefully there'll be a time in my life where I can get back to building.
There's just not enough hours in the day, is there?
No, there's not. We need to cure sleep. Once we cure sleep, I'll be good to go.
That's another startup idea. Next project to work on. I like something you said earlier about having a healthy disrespect for authority. Could you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah. Probably the best example I have is I guess you could probably call the last real job I had was I was living in California. This is kind of the end of my stint being a bum, and I was working in a ski shop for a couple months. And I remember one day corporate made a surprise bit. Well, first of all, we had a manager who was, she just had the whole store on lockdown. Everything had to go through her, and she just ran the place with an iron fist. And one day corporate decided to come in and basically do a surprise visit. And they asked a couple of the employees. I was assistant manager at the time, and they kind of asked, what are some ways that we could do better? Do you have any improvements for the store? Most employees, especially working in a ski shop, just kind of nod their head and they're like, I don't know. I just want to get outside and ski. And I was like, well, it's funny you asked. And I just rattled off like 20 things. And basically, it got back to my manager, and she reprimanded me for speaking out of turn and not following the chain. And I quit. And that's the only time in my life that I've just quit on the spot. And I got reprimanded for not following the chain of command and not following the process. And that definitely was like just the big signifier that I just,
Travis, before you get going, I think we lost your video here.
Okay, yeah, let me see if I can turn that back. Yeah, I just realized. Okay, I think it's coming back on now.
All right.
You got me?
Cool. Yeah, we're in good shape. Yeah,
Okay.
so you ended up getting reprimanded for providing some decent suggestions.
Yeah, and I just realized then that because I was not able to follow the process and the chain of command, I just said, what, like I can't do this. I'd like to believe that I have a tremendous amount of respect and humility for the right organization and the right authority figure, but my experiences in the corporate world, and even down to the grocery store I worked in when I was 16 years old, I've just never been able to do well with complacency and authority that likes to manage, people that like to be a manager just to be a manager and not a leader, and I've never done well.
I completely understand that. Well, so let's talk a little bit about ambition. What is it? How does it work? Tell us about it.
Absolutely. So ambition is kind of honestly, it's pretty crazy how it came about. It was honestly a pretty random conversation between two of my co-founders who, we all have varying levels of sales experience, from my co-founder Brian doing enterprise sales at HP to my co-founder Jared and I being more in the retail space. But just really just, knowing like through and through just sales and having to, sales and pick the phone and do it. And then also, manage people that might not be as motivated as you are and trying to get them to, be inspired and happy when they're doing it. And we had actually had, we were working on a startup at the time called Fireplug, which was basically in the news space. And we were kind of frustrated one day, and we were just like, man, like we need to build something that like we can truly sell. That's like B2B, and we can make money off of it, and we can build the relationships that we know how to build. And we started thinking about our previous experiences, and really we kind of came to this conclusion and kind of epiphany that the most exciting moments in our sales office, years were always when fantasy football came around. And everybody would get so fired up and talk. And Weird to say, but it's always this really special time. And, it kind of makes sense. There's 23 million Americans that play fantasy football. And the last stat that I read was they spent 17 billion, or no, I think maybe it's 17 billion hours a year doing it. And we said, what if we could actually take this paradigm behind fantasy football, which is basically, employees forming the teams and basically compete week to week across seasons. What if we could actually apply that to the workforce? And, we built this kind of prototype and we ended up launching it. And it was kind of like our first aha moment that we've had as entrepreneurs, where we launched it and not only were people using it, more and more as time went on, but we were actually able to kind of show hard ROI numbers. We actually, for this big customer, we're actually able to increase their outbound phone calls from 1,000 a day to 21,000 a day. We're able to increase, their average monthly sales, and basically be able to show that, like, wow, not only were we engaging the company more money, and from there we basically took a step back and said, okay, we truly think we're onto something. We kind of realized that it was the right time and the right place for, I guess, even though I'm not a big fan of this term, basically enterprise gamification. And, we looked at the market and realized that most companies that were complaining about, the millennials 5 years ago, they might not be, as diligent and disciplined as their predecessors, but quite frankly, we're starting to take over the workforce, and they can basically either engage us and drive productivity, or they can keep complaining about us, and it's going to be the same old results. So we said, okay, this is the right time and the right place, and we basically started building out Ambition, and we actually started sunsetting this previous startup it was actually doing decently well. We had a couple kind of like acqui-hire offers, and we basically looked at some money on the table and said, look, like, Ambition is too promising. We don't want to go down that path. Like, even if we did the golden handcuffs thing for a couple years, we might miss out on an opportunity. So we basically turned a couple down and focused on basically how can we make the sales environment more engaging, more productive, and not only that, but truly align incentives between the employees, the managers, and the company itself. Like, we're really, really big on, we don't want to just build fun games for employees. We don't want to build managers, and we don't want to just build a typical analytics suite for the business. We want to build something that caters to everybody, so that it actually helps the entire company move forward and builds the culture that pays the long-term dividends. And that's kind of been our goal.
Right. So this Fireplug news app, is that, I guess that was going to make money from ad revenue? Is that the thing? And you actually wanted to kind of be able to sell something? Basically,
yeah. So I mean, Fireplug, it didn't really have a business model. It was, your typical, let's get a bunch of users and figure something out. And again, like, it was doing well, and it's something that I'm still, like, the space I'm very passionate about. And I tell people that, like, one day I want to kind of reawaken Fireplug. But yeah, we just said, like, let's play to our strengths. Not only play to our strengths, who we are and what we're good at, but also play to the strengths of being in Chattanooga, Tennessee, which is where we're based. And the fact that, you could probably make the argument that if you want to be a new startup, you should probably be in San Francisco or New York. But if you want to be a B2B company that sells to, unsexy companies, like, Chattanooga is a perfectly fine place to do that. And, we kind of just looked at the board and said, okay, let's play to our strengths.
That's interesting. I'm a huge fan of technology companies in the South, so I think that's awesome that you guys are in Chattanooga. And it seems to be this. I'm pretty involved in with a bunch of startups in Atlanta, and that seems to be the same story. B2B is where it's at, and there's companies there making money. They don't have a bajillion users, but they're making money with the companies they do have. I guess, what are some of the other kind of advantages and disadvantages of of being a tech startup in Chattanooga?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I've recently, up until this year, I quite honestly didn't really have a lot of perspective, and I still, don't relatively, but Ambition was accepted in November to Y-Combinator's Winter 14 class, and actually spent most of 3 months this there's definitely, there's definitely a lot of advantages to being in the Bay Area. Just the collision points, the conversations you have with, whether you're in a coffee shop and you end up, meeting this incredible developer who, solves a problem for you in 10 seconds, or whether, you run into an investor and, that warm introduction basically leads to, funding. That's big, and that's something that can't be understated. And it's also, there's something to be said about, a lot of the top tech talent definitely does gravitate to San Francisco. And if you want, if you need to scale a top tier engineering team, I don't think that there's a better place to do it in the world than San Francisco. But, with that said, San Francisco, in the Bay Area in general is incredibly expensive. And, when you look at the number one thing that kills a startup is running out of money. You can blame it on a lot of different factors, but that's when it runs out of money. And the fact that we could basically operate in Chattanooga at 1/5 the costs as a Bay Area, to us, at the stage of our life right now, with ambition, it just makes sense to save that money, prolong our run rate. Put some of the money we're saving on rent and put it toward an extra sales guy or two. That's big. Another thing too is just the the distractions that the Bay Area presents itself with, and granted, that's on the individual, because you have to obviously learn how to deal with distractions at some point. But it helps that for better or for worse, in Chattanooga, there's not cocktail parties or conferences or hackathons every single night. It's basically, hey, you know what? We're going to get in the office at 8. We're going to work until 7. We're going to eat dinner, and we're going to probably come back and work. And there's not a lot of things pulling at us, so it really is kind of conducive to getting a lot done real well, which I think again is huge. We spend less money and we spend more time working, and I feel like that's I think that's a couple critical success factors we have that's going to make us successful down the road.
It's interesting. The guys at Need Want, who've funded several successful Kickstarter campaigns, probably their most famous thing is the Mod Notebook, but they moved from San Francisco to St. Louis. And it's interesting. They said that you could go from splitting an apartment with somebody in San Francisco for 4 years, and for that same price, $120,000, whatever it is, you could buy a really nice apartment in downtown St. Louis and be by yourself.
I live in Chattanooga. I live downtown. I live in a townhouse that I share with a co-founder and employee downtown on the river, and I think I pay $500 a month. And in our office, we just built out a 3,000 square foot office. I think our rent is $3,000 a month. And it's just, again, right now I'm trying to focus on best of both worlds. I do come out to the Bay Area once a month, but I really like having the team and our focus in Chattanooga. And we'll see where it takes us. My big thing is to do what's best for the company. My personal needs. I'd probably, be drawn more to a bigger city at this point in my life. But I think that the best thing for ambition right now is Chattanooga. In 6 months that might change, but we'll just play it by ear. I've definitely learned to not make as many bold predictions as I used to. I could easily see myself 3 years ago be like, we're going to be in Chattanooga forever, but who knows? We'll see.
Well, speaking of San Francisco and Chattanooga, how do you, what's it like? How do you split your time between Tennessee and California?
Yeah, a lot of red eyes, a lot of early flights. I'm an early riser. It's this morning, for instance, I'm in San Francisco right now. Woke up at 4:30, got the 6 a.m. flight out of Chattanooga. Was basically here in San Francisco for most of a full work day, and then on Sunday, I'll red eye home and basically get in the office Monday morning at 7 a.m. and be good to go. So right now, I'm probably doing. I'm trying to spend about 2 to 4 days in San Francisco every month, and really the core reason for that, we definitely do have some customers out here that we're talking to, but most of it is, just staying up to date with investors. Making sure that they know what's going on, they know our growth, they know our struggles. That's probably one of the difficult things I'm having to be hypersensitive to, is that whether we're doing good or bad, it's important that, quite frankly, we stay on the radar of some of the, relatively important people that we've been able to build relationships out here. So I see a lot of my time, just working on those relationships and, talking to people and, tapping into, again, that good, the good part of the Bay Area, which is the collision points, and just being able to talk to, some incredible people that are, the leaders in their field across the world.
So, I'm kind of curious what, as a company that kind of makes a kind of a tool for sales teams, how did you guys get your first customers?
Yeah. Honestly, our first customer, basically it was somebody that we knew in Chattanooga, and we basically, kind of told them about this idea, and they were like, you know what, we've got this huge sales team. It was, I think, 400 people at the time. And they kind of said, and again, I think this is where we can be pretty persuasive, but they said, look, if you build this, we will pilot it. And the pilot went well. And then we basically, one of the things we learned early on was, if you can build an evangelist or build a winner in somebody, then, basically tell them to evangelize for you. And we told this one customer, okay, who are five other companies that you think you could use this and that you can get us in the door with. And we basically use that philosophy with customers. We've used it with investors. We've used it with friends and family, and saying, look, we're not asking for a lot. We're just asking for one warm introduction, one email with us copied on it, and we'll take it from there. And that's been, that's been really successful for us.
So it's been kind of like a referral program almost.
Basically. Yeah, and I mean, it's been a pretty just unofficial, off the cuff referral program, but it's been successful so far. And then we've actually just added 2 new employees in the last 4 weeks. One is basically an inbound marketer who's going to start creating a lot more of our content and basically being able to drive in, leads to us that are interested leads. And then the other one is kind of our BDR, business development rep, where he's basically doing lead gen, going out, and he has a target account and basically just trying to talk to as many companies as he can every week, and basically set up demos for myself and my other 2 business co-founders to take. And so far it's gone well. We actually we have the very good problem that we have way more customers wanting to use Ambition than we can spin up right now. Right now, technology is still kind of our bottleneck, just doing all the data integrations. But we're slowly getting to the point, and our tech team is very excited to finally get to the point where they can basically say, okay, you know what? We built out the ability for you guys to basically go out and get 80% of the customers out there, whether that's by syncing with their CRM or a phone system, or even them just sending us a CSV. So we're finally, as a sales team, ready to, ramp up, and that's what's most exciting to me, because, I've learned as a business guy, I've learned just some degree of success to be able to build an engineering team. And now the sales team is more my style of being like, okay, everybody, 7:30 stand-up meeting, and then we're going to go, hammer 12 hours, and then we're going to go out and get beers later. And I don't know, I think it's going to be a good time.
Definitely. Well, talking about kind of inbound stuff, I saw on the Try Ambition site, you guys have this thing called Ambition Academy.
Yeah.
Could you tell us a little bit, what is that?
For sure. So Ambition Academy is something, right now it's basically, it's a very, very small taste of kind of where we want to go with it. And it's the concept and philosophy that, ambition is a platform, but at the end of the day, a platform needs, it needs content around it. It needs basically ways that we can help people, quite frankly, use it. I look at Ambition as it is today, and I always look at it as a user experience. And my goal is basically, obviously, to get to the point where people can just onboard on Ambition, and it's just so intuitive and so perfect that they just don't even need any of our help. But until we get to that day, Ambition Academy is basically going to serve as a way to say, hey, you've just and basically spun up on Ambition. Here are some ways. Here's some best practices. Here are here's some ways, whether you are an employee, a captain of a team, a manager, or even a COO. Here are ways to use this, to maximize productivity, and basically be able to build in some case studies, build in some really cool things that we've learned from our customers, For instance, one of the most exciting features that we've rolled out is basically the concept of ambition triggers. And basically what it means is that, one of our big pushes that we tell managers is that with ambition, they can spend less time in Excel and more time, kind of out on the floor, talking to their people and actually kind of understanding the pulse of the organization. And they can basically build triggers to help notify them of the inflection points that they know, are basically leading to good or bad behavior. And for instance, they can build a trigger that is, hey, if an employee is at 20% of their phone call quota by 10 a.m., I know as an experienced manager this is going to lead to a problem, and I need to be alerted about it. I need to proactively address it. Or vice versa, maybe I would like to know anytime that an employee is 95% of the way to their all-time record for a given metric, and I want to be able to go fire them up before the fact and basically recognize that employee. And quite frankly, they're really never expecting to be recognized. And we've learned all these things working with these managers. And part of Ambition Academy is basically taking all these really cool concepts and building it into this library of saying, hey, are you a manager that's running a sales team of, 200 people in this vertical? Well, why don't you kind of install this package of tools and triggers that you can use to, try out and basically see if it works for you. And basically get to the point where it's just a really solid kind of ROI proven resource for a variety of different people to, just run a more effective organization. So it's kind of in its infancy right now, but, I'm probably more excited about the academy than most. Like, at our products and perfecting pixels and adding, features here and there. But really what's most exciting to me is like with the given platform that we have, what are all the different ways that people can, what can people do with it? And that's where we want, Academy to serve.
Interesting. Well, kind of talking about sales teams, for startups, what are the key metrics that, they should be looking at as far as sales go?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Really, it just all comes down to behavior. Like, startups early on, it's so, like your customer acquisition costs and your lead times and your sales cycles and, even like your revenue per employee. That's so tough to like actually measure in the beginning because, you're still trying to find your product market fit. You don't even really have like your target, your ideal target customer. To us, it really just comes down to the behavior of saying, okay, with our organization, where are we getting the most traction to basically spinning up customers? Is it starting with an email? Is it starting with a LinkedIn connection? Is it starting with a phone call? Basically just finding out, okay, where's everything starting? And let's measure that one metric. And then where does that go? Does that lead to a web demo? Does that lead to an in-person meeting? And basically building out, like focusing less on like the financial perspective of like, what is this activity doing for us, and kind of measuring, okay, employee, you made us, 90 grand last quarter. And more on is, okay, like how many, like on the back end, like how many of these metrics are you doing? Are you consistent, or are you all over the place? And then really kind of measuring, okay, you sent out 6,000 emails last month. Are those actually converting to anything? And I think that's the most important than optimizing too early on the financial side, because again, like a lot of it is just so hit or miss. Like even for us, we've landed big deals, and they were, quite frankly, and if we would have like really built a process around it, we would have kind of wasted our time. So I don't know, that's kind of my take on it.
Well, so what do you think makes a really great salesperson?
A great salesperson, this is cliche, but it really is it's just hustle. It's hustle, and then it's just it's just, I don't know if confidence is the right word, but it's just not being afraid to hear no. Like we've learned, the best, in my opinion, especially for what we're doing, the best salespeople are the people that did door-to-door sales in college. Because these are people that like, if you learn how to go door-to-door in the hot sun for 12 hours a day, and you're, spending your summer in college doing that, and basically having people tell you no to your face, then sending out an email or picking up a phone, this is like, it's
like, what's the worst that's going to happen?
Yeah, it's the easiest job in the world. So it's really just having the tenacity, the hustle, and just not being afraid to hear no. And but honestly, just having a love for the problem. And a lot of it is like the competition of, I love this product, I love this company, and I love that like I basically am in an organization where I get to, be a part of something bigger than myself. I get to compete with other people, and I get recognized not only as a person but as a team, and as basically just a driving force in moving the ball forward. Somebody that kind of like recognizes that. To us, that's those are the people we're looking for and trying to hire. Another big thing, especially for startup salespeople, is you don't necessarily want to find the salesperson that is in a way too strategic, because at the end of the day, you really want that selling, but also somebody that can realize that like they might need to wear a couple different hats and basically say, okay, I need to try a couple different email templates. I need to try a couple different mediums. Maybe I can actually explore a little bit of writing content on my own and basically attaching that with some of the emails I'm sending out or some of the phone calls that I'm leading into. So definitely having the early salespeople, you definitely want them to be a little bit entrepreneurial and just being able to try new things and actually kind of analyze the results. But at the same time, what you don't want is the person that doesn't want to do the real hard nitty-gritty work and basically sit back and look at Google Analytics all day, because that's not really going to get you anywhere. And that's kind of a common trap that people will fall into.
Interesting. Well, what do you think the future of Ambition is like? What are your next steps?
Yeah, absolutely. I think really our product right now is pretty solid just in terms of where we're at. With a small amount of customers. Our next steps for us really in the next 3 to 12 months is focusing on a couple key integrations and basically just saying, okay, we've knocked out Salesforce, we've knocked out a couple of the big phone systems like Cisco and BroadSoft, and knocking out some of the integrations that cater more to small sales teams, like doing like a Google Apps integration or even just like a pretty simple CSV uploader. So really the big focus is going to be on just gathering more data and basically allowing companies to kind of aggregate more data on our platform. Because that's one of our biggest strengths right now, is saying, hey, not only can you monitor your Salesforce activity on Ambition, but you can also plug in your phone system, and you can even pipe us a CSV that you come up with completely arbitrary numbers every day, and basically we can aggregate it all in and kind of build this this ambition score, this overall performance metric for employees. So that's a big step for us. I mean, really, it is just it's just figuring out better ways to align incentives, figuring out better ways to help employees, managers, and companies. One of the things that we've learned early on is that it kind of surprised us. Is we would start selling to companies, and we'd say, okay, the very beginning of Ambition is let's set some benchmarks. Let's take an employee, let's take your account executives, and now let's figure out their metrics, and then where are the benchmarks, and then we can go from there. We would talk to like several hundred million. They basically tell us, well, we don't really have daily activity benchmarks. We kind of just measure everything by quarterly financial performance. And this is kind of a wake-up call to us that we're actually going to have to be more consultants than we thought. And one of the things that we did, not only learning how to build better success plans for organizations, but also kind of from a data analysis standpoint, we now basically build in a way for us to basically pull in up to a year's worth of data and basically help them not only show them basically the benchmarks they're doing right now, and basically recommend to them ways to increase the benchmarks that they didn't even know they really had, to also being able to kind of show them across their industry, hey, by the way, you're a logistics company. We're working with 6 logistics companies right now, and here's kind of where they're falling anonymously. So here's actually better indicators of like where your employees need to be. So basically thinking through some bigger picture stuff like that, I think is going to be really exciting and a really promising way for us to be able to sell into, the bigger Fortune. But really, I mean, the future, we're pretty bullish on it. Like there's definitely a couple people in the sales productivity space. It's definitely, it's going to be a fight for market share, but at the same time, Gartner just released a study, and I think it is 70% of the Fortune 2000 companies are gamifying their internal processes for the first time this year. And you look at right now, 1 out of every 3 employees is a millennial. In 10 years, it's going to be 3 out of every 4. And this millennial generation, not only is it the largest in history at 80 million, but we're the first. There's a major break in between us and our predecessors. We are the first generation to grow up with the internet, to grow up like expecting an interactive, real-time experience. And we're not our coin operated mothers and fathers. Like we expect there to be in some regard more fun and more games at work, and that's where we see this space taking off. And right now, the industry as a whole is growing, I think 67% year over year, and it's still kind of in its infancy. The word gamification, has kind of gotten played out in the consumer space, but in enterprises is taking off, and more importantly, the big companies are starting to realize that we need to allocate budget toward this and take this seriously. So we're really excited. We just raised a couple $1 million from some really incredible investors, from SV Angel to Google Ventures to Highline and Redpoint and Promise and a bunch of people, and they're excited to work with us and basically get us to the next level. And I don't know, it's gonna be tiring. It's gonna be a lot of mistakes and a lot of pain, but I think quite honestly, I think in 3 to 5 years, I think we're gonna be a leader in the space.
Speaking of mistakes and kind of pain, what mistakes do you think you've made so far, and what lessons have you learned from them?
So I was actually having a conversation. I was having a conversation with a guy today, and we were talking about this, where sometimes the best deal you can make, sometimes the best deal is actually walking away from a big customer. And we early on said yes to too many people, and basically let them kind of define our time and our scope. And basically, obviously in the beginning, you have to cater to customer needs, and you have to you have to be a little bit more flexible, because you need to get paid, and you need to build your case studies. But at the same time, we kind of found ourselves spending 80% of our time doing maintenance work for custom stuff that we should have done in the first place. And we kind of realized this is not what a startup should be doing. Like, it should be the inverse. We should be spending 20% of our time maintaining and 80% of our time building and onboarding. So that's been a big one. I think, all the way back to, the beginning days of, our first startup was definitely just not understanding the needs, and, me not being technical and trying to build a technical team. I think that, underestimating how long things are going to take. As a sales guy, it's easy for me to overpromise. It's kind of in my nature. And, in the past, in previous lives and previous jobs, it was relatively easy for me to deliver and over-deliver. And, when technology is your bottleneck, and when things, you just quite frankly take time, whether it's weeks or months, you can kind of get in some trouble that way. So we've kind of had to, go back to a couple customers, potential customers with our tail between our legs, and just saying, look, we can't do what we said we were going to do, and we're going to need a couple more months to be able to deliver ambition to you. And that's always tough, but it's lessons learned, and I think we're definitely better for it. And I feel like while we're still very much in survival mode, I think that we've kind of survived the first kind of year and a half of spinning up a 5-person customer, spinning up a 500-person customer, and making some mistakes and seeing some downtime, and hiring a team and figuring out exactly where people need to spend their time. But I don't know. I mean, I'm sure if I sat down and made a list, there's hundreds of them. But that will be in my memoirs.
If you don't mind me asking, what happened with those kind of early customers that you were spending so much time on? How was that resolved?
Yeah, I mean, one of the hardest things I've had to do in my life, and that I think the team would agree, is we had to let some customers go. And that is, as a startup, that is the worst feeling in the world. But we basically had some customers that we were working with, and then we had some potential customers who we said we were going to work with. And we basically just had to say, look, like, we cannot scale with the work that we've done for you. And quite frankly, we're spending too much time basically debugging issues with this platform or with this API or whatever it was, and we're just going to need to end this relationship. And we're sorry about this, and this is on us. And it hurt, and we had to watch our revenue drop. But I think overall we're in a good place. We've actually had a couple customers, like one of the signs that we're still on the right path is we had one of the customers that we had to basically say no to. They've now kind of come back to us and they said, okay, what is a way? How do we need to organize our data, or what systems do we need to use for us to actually make this work? And that's kind of been exciting. That okay, you know what, like maybe we really are onto something that that is going to change, the sales team, because we're able to kind of get some relatively slow moving companies to say, you know what, maybe this actually is worth it, and we'll actually upgrade some existing technology to make this work. So I don't know, we'll see. But we still have plenty of lessons to be learned. Right now we're working up to being able to sign up, and still early going, but I'm pretty confident in our abilities.
Well, thanks for sharing that. To me, that's really interesting, because you think startups need to get all the revenue they can, but if they're causing most of your pain, that makes sense.
Yeah.
We're kind of reaching the end of the interview here. I'm curious, Travis, who do you look up to?
Good question. Man, it's tough. I mean, I have a lot of mentors back in Chattanooga, a lot of guys that are just brick and mortar guys that, decided never to play the investor game, never play like the publicity game. And basically they have built, billion-dollar companies without taking a penny. And, they've run companies the way they wanted to run. And, specifically, I have three big mentors back home, Ted Allen, Alan Davis, and Barry Large. Guys like Randy Redberg, who started Expert Exchange, again, with no investment money, and now he spends a lot of his time in Chattanooga. And again, the guys that, basically say, look, we're not going to be the sexiest company or the sexiest persona in town, but we're going to build cool things to help cool people and, go from there. So I'd say that's been big. The Y-Combinator experience was pretty special in just being able to surround yourself with people that a lot of them, had been working, making, fantastic salaries with incredible benefits at, some of the greatest, most innovative companies in the world. And they basically said, you know what, let's give it up and, suffer for a couple of years at least on a startup. And that was a really cool experience, and kind of having the mentorship there with a lot of the Y-Combinator partners that, they've already had incredible exits and they are set for life, and they just keep coming back and doing it again. It's been cool. So I don't know if I have any truly specific people, especially in the tech world, but I don't know. Anybody that hustles, I respect.
Fair enough. Well, I guess, do you have any last comments or advice for entrepreneurs out there, people trying to start companies?
Yeah, one thing I like to talk about, I've been privileged to speak at a couple college classes, and I talk a lot about how, in college, we're just, when you're wanting to start a company, there's this imaginary line of basically, do you actually go in or not? And in college, I towed that line several times and backed down basically every single time. And I always came up with a reason not to do it. And, I've kind of learned as I've grown older that every day that goes by, you're going to basically come up with another reason not to do something. And, again, as cliche as it is, and as I was, just cross that line, go all in. And if you're passionate about it and if you believe in what you're doing, then just do it. And, for me, it took maybe the lapse of judgment to surrender my life insurance policy and to basically say, okay, there's no turning back from here, to really kind of fully commit myself. And maybe, you don't need to do something that extreme, but again, if it's something you're passionate about, you just got to do it, because again, every day that goes by, you're less likely to do something crazy, and a startup is certainly crazy.
Definitely. Well, where can people find you? What's the best way to give you money?
Yeah, so I have a small Twitter presence. It is TD Truett. And then, if anybody wants to email me and just ask me anything, I'd love to help out. I like to pay it forward, when I can, which is basically just try. And yeah, and then if you find yourself running a sales team, or if you're part of a sales team, check out ambition.com, and basically you can test drive our full product right there on the site, and feel free to reach out and we'll spin you up a pilot.
Great. Travis, thank you for joining me.
Hey, appreciate it. It's been great, and yeah, thanks for your time.